The webinar has begun and we are being recorded.
Excellent. I'm going to actually grab it agenda so we don't miss anything. All right. I will call the January 31st, 2024 BPAC meeting to order. And that we'll move to the roll call. Brandon, could you do a roll call?
Yes. Member Valerie Fenwick.
Present.
Member Lada Atomic.
Here.
Chair James Kuzmal.
Present.
Vice Chair Isaac Stone.
Present.
Member Terry Barton.
Present.
Chair, we are all BPAC members are present and accounted for.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to item 3, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes, and state law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agendized items. If you are in the room and wish to speak, move to the podium or stand or whatever it's called. If you are online, you may raise your hand in Zoom. Do we have any public speakers on non-agendized items?
And I am not sure why it is not showing me speakers. The can see that we have 8 members of the public, 9 members of the public in attendance, but not them.
I can see it.
You can see them?
Do you want me to go ahead and?
Yes. Do you have hands up?
Yeah, so I'll just start with the first person I see is Randall Tarley.
Can you speak up a little bit?
I'm not able to.
Let me make you a host.
Okay, so the first, I can see it now. The first person I see is Randall Tarley. I'll we're gonna promote to panelist. We'll talk.
Randall, Kirsten is going to click to unmute you and allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes to talk.
Fantastic. I'm assuming I'm coming through all right.
Yep.
Perfect. My name is Randall Tarley, and I'm a member of the Jewish community. And I have noticed there's been quite a bit of anti-Semitism going around. So I would just like to share a little bit of information in order to help combat the anti-Semitism that I'm seeing in our community, especially since the whole, Chabad thing in New York. It's just been a little silly and it's been a little over the top. And thank you for the timer. I know I'm a few seconds past that, but I'd just like to read some scripture from the Talmud. And it's our holy book that's in every synagogue in America and across the world. Everyone has a copy of the Talmud. I know you've all heard of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, or the first 5 books of Moses, if we translate out of Hebrew. But I'm speaking specifically about the Talmud. So I'd just like to quote a couple verses to help combat the anti-Semitism, just to show what us as a Jewish people actually think. And I'm going to start with Yebamoth 98a. It's where it states that, and then in Gittin 57a, it states in our holy excrement. And in Sanhedrin 57a, death penalty.
Pause this public
And engages in intercourse with
out of order and disruptive.
age has done nothing wrong. I'm reading scripture. If you can read from the Bible, I can read from the Talmud. Thank you very much. Why are you being anti-religious? We have freedom of religion. This is an open public forum.
Thank you, Brandon. That is my understanding of the way that public comment works in Brown Act bodies, is that members of the public are permitted to make public comments without sticking to the agenda. There are, however, constraints on disruptive and hateful speech. I am not an expert on the matter, but
I didn't say anything hateful. I read.
How did that happen?
Somebody can read from the new,
Can you remove his permission?
and it's no issue.
Thank you, Kirsten.
right. Do we have any additional general public comment?
Yes. Okay, the next person I see is Andy O'Brien.
Yes, hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I don't necessarily agree with the previous. Hello, can you hear me? You gonna let me speak? All right. Well, I wanted to say I didn't necessarily agree with the previous speaker on all of his points, but he has a right to say those things. It's supposed to still be a free country, and we can have opinions that, can be offensive, or, you don't have to agree with it. It's supposed to be a free country. A lot of these states and a lot of cities have been sued for cutting off people's speech. So I'd please consider to not violate any more people's First Amendment to speak in these city councils. In San Diego, a man came to a city council meeting wearing a Klansman robe, and they wouldn't let him speak, and he sued and won $250,000. So silencing people's free speech just because you don't like what they have to say, that's a big no-no. What I want to talk about is I have a little speech here, and it's, what is a woman? The Cambridge Dictionary says a woman is an adult female human being. Does taking hormone blockers make you one? Does castrating yourself make you one? Does dressing up as a woman make you a woman? Does believing you're a woman make you one? No. All these. Are you going to let me speak, or are you going to keep acting like a bunch of dicks? Those.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You guys keep censoring me and cutting me off.
No, I'm actually a speaker. I've been unmuted. It's April Webster. Let me know when you want me to speak. I'm unmuted, but I can't hear anything. I think you're muted. The conference room is currently muted. Whenever you're ready.
April, can you hear us?
Yes, Roger, I can hear you.
Okay, just a second.
Take your time.
And again.
Thank you for letting me have the stage. I am really excited to share a recent release of Caltrans Complete Streets Design Guidelines and its pivotal introduction of green streets and 10.5-foot lane widths. This is big. I think the next slide is coming. If not, you can press the next slide. There has been a progression in street design over the past half decade. We've transitioned from streets designed to move cars to one that prioritizes people. And today what we're seeing is a design that addresses climate resiliency. Caltrans is surprisingly keeping up, probably due to the influence of Talk Samishakan. Under his guidance, their mission has expanded to include inclusivity, equity, and climate resiliency. Also, at that time in 2021, their policies and strategic direction were updated. Climate action was identified as a major goal in their strategic plan, and DP37 identified reducing environmental impacts of streets. Fast forward 3 years to now, and we are seeing those priorities trickle down into their design guidelines. in DIB 94, and it probably won't be long until we see the funding follow suit. This is the usual sort of path. It's important to emphasize that DIB 94 takes precedent for complete streets projects in California. They supersede HDM. And this makes it easier for local jurisdictions to make use of Green Street's elements and the 10.5-foot wide lanes. Huge. In fact, Caltrans goes as far as to advise that Green Street's elements should be considered and used whenever possible for vertical separation in protected bike lanes.
1 minute.
DIB 94 includes an entire section on green streets. It starts by pointing out that streets will best meet the needs of all users when they are designed as green streets. And I'm sure, coming up to the next slide, we've all experienced this in the past few years, and I find it somewhat amusing that Caltrans points this out. But a flooded street is not a complete street. Basically, no one wins when the streets are flooded, not even cars. And just in the next slide, this is one of the major reasons we're seeing this prioritized now. Streets are impervious. Most of our cities are covered in streets and asphalt and water pools instead of infiltrating the ground. So in the section, thanks, they identify 3 types of elements. They can be combined in hybrid configurations to meet budgets. And I just, thank you.
That's time.
Thanks.
Do we have additional general public comments?
Yeah, there's 3 more. So next I see is Lainey David. I'm going to unmute.
Hold on, actually, hold on.
Sorry, one
Please.
minute.
And I'll say that anyone who hasn't yet raised their hand is not, we closed the queue already, is what I'll say.
Now go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and unmute Lainey David again.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So thank you for allowing everyone to make public comment this evening. I would like to share something with everyone that is once again becoming relevant. And I think it's worth pointing out because there's like this disease X mass hysteria hype, which is being perpetuated by the media, which I'd like to point out is
Chair, we
90%.
need to verify that this comment will be related to bicycle and ped in some fashion.
Okay.
This isn't public comment for speaking about other things, huh?
This is a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee meeting. Public comments should be related to.
Well, it is relevant because if people are out in public and they're having bicycles and pedestrians around each other, this is going to affect people being out in public if we're all locked down again. So, like I was saying, we have this disease X mass hysteria hype that is.
Let me remove permission.
It sounded like we had 2 more people in the queue.
Yeah, there's 1 more now.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the last person.
What's her name?
Mitzi Bethe.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. My name is Mitzi Bapay. I would like to speak about the bicycle lanes. But first, as a practicing attorney, I would like to caution you when it comes to cutting people off. I understand that you have to keep people civil and whatnot. But Supreme Court justices have time and time again in favor of free speech. In fact, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell, when he was tasked with United States versus Schwimmer, he said if there is any principle of the Constitution that more imperatively calls for attachment than any other, is the principle of free thought. Not free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. Even more recently, Justice Samuel Alito said that speech that demeans on a basis of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, disability, or any other similar ground is hateful. But it is our proudest boast of our free speech. Jurisprudence is that we protect the freedom to express the thought that we hate. And I understand trying to make everyone comfortable and whatnot, but when I joined, there was one man talking, and he was Jewish himself, speaking from his holy book. So I understand you might not like what he was saying because it was kind of disturbing for me personally to hear, but he has a right to speak from his own holy book. And to cut him off actually is anti-Semitic. And I think that's really biased of you guys. So I would like to caution you, people have been sued over it, but we'll put free speech aside since you guys already have. And I'd like to actually speak about pedestrians, the safety and walking. I've noticed that the streets seem louder than usual, and that's probably because there's tunneling underground.
With that, we are done with our general public comment. We will move to item 4, the minutes approval. I assume there is no staff presentation on the minutes approval.
No.
Okay. Are there any committee clarifying questions on the minutes approval? All right. Do we have any public comment on the minutes approval?
Raised hands. No raised hands.
All right, thank you. With that, we will move to committee comments and hopefully approval of the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion? Member Adamic.
I just want to say, I really appreciate like how time after time, the minutes are very well written and comprehensive. I've perused some other minutes and they tend to be briefer, and it's much more difficult to figure out what was said. So thank you so much. So with that, I would like to move that we approve the minutes from, December? Yes.
Yes.
No, November.
Yes, November 29th, 2023.
Yes, thanks.
Member Fenwick here. I also have reviewed the minutes. They look complete and accurate to me. I would like to second that motion.
Right. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Everyone approved it, so 5-0 approval. We will now close minutes approval. We will move to item 5.1, the election process for the 2024 chair and vice chair. Do we have any presentation or review of the memo? Okay. My understanding of the process is that it will be, we approve the chair, that we or vote for a new chair. We then vote for, that will then hand over the running of the meeting to the new chair. We will then vote for a vice chair.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any public comment on the chair and vice chair election process? Nope. Okay. With that, traditionally we have had the vice chair be the next chair. I assume you are agreeable to that, Vice Chair Stone, but I don't know that.
Yes.
All right.
May I make a
Yes.
motion, please?
Please.
I would like to nominate Vice Chair Stone to be our chair for the coming year.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Terry.
All right.
So you get to call the vote still.
Yes, are there any other, yes, I know.
I guess it's not a motion yet, it's a nomination.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we have a formal procedure that, but it involves other people who be nominated, but I heard a motion and we make motions to make things happen, so. Unless there's any other counter motions or the such. All right. All in favor of having, Member Stone be the chair for the upcoming calendar year?
I,
I see 5 in favor, so none opposed. Gavel.
Okay, next we move on to the election of the vice chair. I am asking for nominations, I assume. Would anyone like to nominate someone to be vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Member Barton if he would be willing, but I know there was hesitation. No. But anyway, sorry, that's maybe it's a question before a nomination.
I would be willing to accept the nomination, provided there's no reason that I wouldn't be eligible.
I think the only, like the practical considerations, I understand it, is that Chair Stone can't also be vice chair. Member Fenwick, I believe your term ends at the end of this calendar year?
it ends of this calendar year, so it would make next year awkward.
Yes, because we would not have a vice chair to turn into the chair. And so that leaves, and I think Member Barton, this person has at least recently been vice chair, which would be never. And I think technically, I think both of our terms first terms conclude at the end of this year, but I think we can operate on some probability that you will continue to be on the BPAC in the following year. I mean, people also sometimes move,
Yeah,
so
we're doing
yes.
vice chair now.
Yes. So I'm just
We believe you
reviewing
are
the basics to make sure that there's no misunderstandings, but that sounds just to me. Since I didn't actually hear a second to this, I'll second that motion.
Is Member Barton willing to accept?
I am.
All right then, all in favor of Barton being vice chair?
I,
Motion passes unanimously. Barton is now vice chair for the remainder of the year. And we will now move on to item 6, which is new business. Item 6.1, personal delivery device pilot update. I believe there is a staff presentation.
Okay, so I'm Kirsten Hines. I'm an economic development strategist with Mountain View. And the purpose of this presentation tonight is to talk about the personal delivery devices and the pilot program. I think it came about a year ago to this committee. We're bringing it back with some additions, augmentations. And then we'll save, I'll go through the presentation and we'll save questions to the end. So the personal delivery device, the PDD pilot program was created in 2018 and then it was updated in 2020 to support essential businesses. The program was originally created in response to the city being approached by companies that made these personal delivery devices wishing to operate within the city. And the city didn't have any policies that directly regulated the use of these. So 2 companies have participated or operated within the city, the first being Google's BookBot that worked with the library and delivered books throughout the neighborhood around the library. And then the second was Starship Technologies, and they came in during 2020 to help with essential businesses, restaurants and grocery stores. And they ceased operations. They decided to discontinue operations in 2022 because the operations weren't profitable for the company at that time. But we have since received inquiries from a few other companies who operate PDDs in the state. So because of the re-engaged interest in operating PDDs in Mountain View, we revisited the pilot program guidelines and have made some proposed additions and augmentations to the program. And this is based on lessons learned from the original and the 2020 update of the pilot program, plus in researching what other communities have done, best practices, and just researching or looking at research that has been done generally on the use of personal delivery devices. So the first item or topic is company requirements. So the additions and augmentations are focused on creating opportunity for mountain view-based companies. So the priority would be for companies that are based in Mountain View already, or that will maintain a local presence beyond just the device. So they would have an office space or a location to store and maintain the personal delivery devices. And then adding a requirement to have a 24/7 contact person for emergency responses or emergency situations that law enforcement can contact. And the second topic is device operations. So this is focused on the size of the device, the number of devices operating. The original requirements had a human handler with the PDD within the first 6 months and had contact information was required to be put on the device. The additions and augmentations are for the human handler, it would be required for a fully autonomous device, which would just be the ones that they would be able to operate on their own technically, but the requirement would be to have the human handling it for the first 6 months to get the lay of the land and work out the city. And then adding contact information for both a city contact person and the vendor in writing and in Braille on the devices. Explicitly stating that they would be permitted on sidewalks and within crosswalks. And then we would consider allowance within the bicycle lane and traffic shoulders. And this would be considered while working closely with the city's transportation division and police department, making sure it's in line with existing codes and the vehicle code. The next topic is data requirements. So the original program current program had a requirement for documentation of incidents involving injury to individuals or animals. This would still be required, but lesson learned from the pilot and through research is that there's a lot of data and information that these devices can collect, and that can be very useful to the city. So some of the data that we would ask for would be number of deliveries completed, miles traveled, heat map of locations, focus areas, estimate of emissions reduced by deliveries, and interactions with individuals and animals. And then public inquiries would need to be documented by the company and shared with the city. All this information would need to be shared quarterly, and then there'd be a requirement for regular check-ins with city staff. And then the other item would be.
See your computer, Brandon.
Rita, can you please mute yourself?
That's, it's you.
I got you. The other requirement for data would be providing feedback and assessment of public infrastructure. For safety requirements, the priority would be for safety for vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and requiring the devices to yield to pedestrians, vehicles, bicyclists. These augmentations would be setting speed limits for sidewalks and bike lanes, minimizing stopping on a curb ramp or pedestrian at pedestrian push buttons where I think they were making sure that they're going when they can recognize when it's time to cross, and then having auditory and light warnings when they come up to people, having additional signals that they're there. And then the company would need to have plans to update for road closures and construction or other emergency responses that would potentially get in the way, or if they would get in the way of these obstacles. And then the last items are generally aligning the use of these devices with other city policies that exist. So for example, with related to this tonight, the active transportation plans and any other city plans specific to area or location. The companies would have to get a mobile vending permit, so they would need to align with the existing rules and regulations of mobile vending permits, which regulate uses near public parks and schools, and it already regulates the hours of operation. And then we would clarify where PDDs are not allowed. They would not be allowed on public trails. And then adding clarification that they have to follow the California Vehicle Code. So in terms of next steps, staff presented to the downtown committee in December. Talking with the bicycle advisory committee today, getting your feedback. We'll take the feedback that we received, finalize the pilot augmentations with Public Works and with input from police department as well. And then we're tentatively bringing this to the city council this spring. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any committee clarifying questions on the item?
Thank you so much for the presentation. This is Member Fennick. I have a couple of questions. First one is, I saw one of the augmentation requirements was to request or require PDDs minimize stopping in the curb ramp. How is that measured, or what is minimized? Is it 20 seconds? Is it 10 minutes? Like I've seen some of them before. Like what is that line and how do we measure that?
That's a good question. I think some of the companies that we've talked to, they've had more experience working in other cities. And so they've been able to kind of collect more information on what that would look like. So I think we would have to work with the companies and with the transportation division to come up with those specific guidelines.
Okay. And then the other question I had was how to track that the robots are actually yielding to pedestrians. I can pull up some videos of where they did not yield to me and ran me off the sidewalk for the prior pilot. So how do we track that?
Well, I think it would be part of the data collection. Hopefully that would be the intention of the data collection, to keep track of any interaction with people. I believe that most of these devices have cameras on them too. And so having that on hand.
And then my last question to that as well, I also saw the augmented request for additional data. Is that, would that be mandated that the operators provide data on, for example, they find broken sidewalks, uplift, that type of data to you?
Yes, yeah, we would require that they provide feedback on any infrastructure, safety challenges or obstacles that they see that would affect any pedestrians or bicyclists too.
Thank you. That's it for my clarifying questions for now.
In fact, John Lang, Economic Vitality Manager, just to expand on the prior question real quickly, which is to say, in addition to being able to collect data from the provider, one of the things we are looking to do is develop a portal where individuals, so traditionally the way we would hear feedback is through Ask MV. The web-based tools that the city has deployed with the new website, there is a collaborative platform that allows for us to better engage with folks. So developing a way to capture that information in a more seamless approach where we can have information about what the pilot is, who the operators are, if there's an issue, this is the way you can communicate with the city, the vendor, et cetera. So there are other ways we can capture that feedback in addition to the providers providing that. And the final point I'd like to just expand upon Kirsten's comment is Kirsten correctly noted there is a mobile vending permit that's tied to this, but there's actually an agreement that goes on top of this. And so this becomes a contractual arrangement. So in addition to mobile vending permit, there's a contractual relationship, and putting more teeth in that to ensure we're getting that information from the providers.
I have actually a follow-on question related to that. So you mentioned they would be required to put phone numbers for contact for support on the vehicle. Do you have a way to verify that this city is actually getting all complaints, is it possible they would go to the vendor and they would just keep it to themselves? How does that work?
So we would hope that I mean, the contractor agreement would stipulate the requirement to provide any comments that they receive. If they're, if you hear otherwise that, you know, staff hears comment from the public, that wasn't accurately reflected in, the information that we're getting from the company, then I think that would be the way that we would try and keep.
And once again, I would comment on the aspect of people self-reporting into the city directly through the collaborative platform. So if we're hearing something, we can say, oh, we had heard something. We didn't get this information from you. Can you please maybe explore what may have happened here? So it creates a two-pronged approach.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just have a questions. I guess most of them will be two-part. Because it sounds like we have the ability to specify in the contractual relationship and metrics that would need to be reported and clarifications before we sign a contract. So I saw a human handler would be engaged. Could the contract specify the distance to that human handler that walk 6 feet behind it? Or what does the human handler relationship to the device? So that should be defined in the contract. And I guess the question is, could that be?
Yeah, that the distance that the human handler would need to be from the device could be something that's added, and we can research what other cities are incorporating in their policies.
Because I think if we have the capability and it's fuzzy or unclear, as many of the language we just saw was, I'd like to see it clarified and be specific so that anybody could agree with the meeting that contractual relationship with whatever metrics in there. Second one be 24-hour contact. Could we have the contract specify the response time when that 24-hour contact number is used? Is a callback required within 15 minutes or 1 hour or 2 weeks? Having a number we can call that will go to an answering service 24 hours a day is very easy with computers, but the question really is, I think, when would the police department or whoever is able to use it get a call back? So the question is, could that be specified?
Yeah, I believe so. Thanks for the.
Okay. There's nothing in the presentation covered the response time for a non-moving or disabled device. So if a device stops in the bike lane or on a sidewalk for whatever reason, mechanical or software, or just because it's waiting for its next pickup instruction, do we have the ability to ask in the contract for a specified response time to move any reported non-moving device?
Yeah, but I think that's something that can be added. And with there's the fully autonomous and the, I guess, partially autonomous, and the partially autonomous would have someone who's kind of behind the scenes at a computer monitoring them. And so at least those companies would have an eye on them. The fully autonomous, you know, after the 6 months, if they decide to remove the human handler, then we would put something into the contract to
Yeah, I guess I'm not worried about
identify.
the software handler. I'm worried about someone that can pick it up and carry it out of the way
Mhm.
and return it to a better location if it becomes stopped. So a tow truck, as it were. So the handler may not be the tow truck if it's a heavy device, for instance. I guess a clarifying question, what vehicle codes are covered, are PDDs covered by?
So my understanding is PDDs are not in the California Vehicle Code, but they're not specifically identified, but they would have to follow the same rules as vehicles or bicycles. I don't know exactly what they're identified as. So it depends on the size,
I'd like them to be identified as automobiles, comply with turn signals and all the measures that they would normally comply with. Like I say, if the vehicle code doesn't currently cover autonomous vehicles or PDDs, saying that they will comply with the vehicle code is kind of a worthless statement. Next question, I guess, is, again, when we talk about various standards, like the word minimize, defining the standard and having that specified in the contract, would be good.
This is the question.
Okay, sorry, let me get the question. So, you mentioned that they connect, lots of data about location. Would it be able to get a log of all stops for pickup and deliveries and the precise within the 1 meter distance of where it is? The reason for that question is I notice a lot of delivery vehicles stopping in bike lanes or parking across the sidewalk from Amazon, UPS or whatever. I believe they are unable to do that, or at least I've never seen one ticketed for doing that. So I'd like to know how often for each pickup a device is stopped and where it stopped. So it sounds like they log all that data. They know the address, they know where it stopped, they know how long it's waiting. That would allow us to get a sense of how often they're blocking infrastructure.
Is this a clarifying question?
Yes. Can that be specified in the contract?
In terms of exactly where it's stopping, I don't know what the privacy implications would be, but adding more information on where it's stopping if it's not generally at either a home or, locate where it is, like within the street or sidewalk. I think those things can be added and we can look into that, yeah.
Okay, can we define interaction? That was a word that the interactions are recorded, but I guess I'd like to know what an interaction is. Is it within 3 feet of a pedestrian, 6 feet with a bicycle? Can we define that so whatever language goes with the contract is clear about what an interaction means? And then we talked about the log of calls. How would that be available to review after the pilot period?
Are you asking in terms of the public reviewing that information or?
Yes, if the number, there's a number on the device.
Mhm.
I'm not sure who will own that number, but can we log all the calls going to that number? And so we have 100% idea of the calls not unfiltered.
That's something we can look into, yeah.
So clarifying questions are clarifying questions about the presentation, not questions of staff.
Okay.
So that should be a comment.
Okay. Yeah, I just heard the word log. I guess I'd like to clarify that. Well, those are all the clarifying questions I had.
Okay, anyone else have?
Clarifying questions.
Yes, sorry, my brain is, yes, go ahead, member Kuzma.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, I am just a member now. The one thing that was sparked by one of the written clarifying questions was, is there any specific plan as to how we would treat all these sort of not quite bike paths, not quite bike lanes or standard sidewalks like paseos or the train stations or anything like that, that's in where things are and they're not allowed to go, or what speed limits they have, that sort of thing?
Yeah, for the areas that are like more ambiguous in terms of rules and where bicycles can go, or economic development staff would have to work with the transportation division, public works department, and determining the rules for specific areas, so that they can be narrowed down.
And furthermore, as we've talked with different providers, there are ways to also geofence, which basically kind of limits the device, if you will, from entering into an area. So to the point of clarifying questions on terms and definitions, that's something we can get.
Has there been any specific interest in like which regions of the city? I know in the past it was mostly the downtown area, but broadly speaking, have there been other areas people have expressed interest in?
So I think the intention would be to expand the program beyond the downtown. And that was one of the requests from the Starship Technologies company. And they wanted to expand because just operating within the downtown was not practical for them. So I believe that would be the goal. However, there might be kind of a slow start to things, doing a similar program in the downtown and expanding again beyond there.
And there has been interest over in the North Bay Shore and over at, over on, San Antonio and the shopping districts over there as a potential opportunity.
Okay. And the last one, I saw a mention about planning to come back to council in spring of 2024. Is the idea, is that going to be you have things more fleshed out then, and you're coming to council with a more sort of finalized policy?
Yeah, so it was a pilot program. So much like what we're doing with both committees is wanting to retool it. We would like to continue the program, but we'd like to augment it. So one, it better actually fits with, I think, the goals we're trying to achieve in Mountain View. So one is specify what we learned. Two, taking the feedback received by both committees, flushing it out so that we can come forward with, here are the proposed augmentations. Here's kind of the revisions we'd like to make in the contractual process and any other kinds of pieces, and have council consider that for continuing the pilot under a kind of new rubric.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Yes, I was wondering, what are the goals the city is trying to achieve?
So there's a few things. There are Mountain View based businesses that play in the space. So one, this does support existing businesses that are here. It does provide them for better proof of concepts. While there are many cities that are allowing devices like this, it's not ubiquitous or uniform. There's still this kind of proof of concept and validity testing that's going on. And it works well in some communities. And so that's part of it. So it's one, supporting our local business ecosystem. Two, as we've engaged with the business community, I'll give you a great example, a flower shop. A small flower shop that's trying to do deliveries when you're 1 and 2 person flower shop and you need to make deliveries, you can't hire people, or it's difficult to hire people to do deliveries. This provides an option to do that delivery service. So we are also trying to meet a business associated with that. More, relatable goals to that is, while this does potentially compete with existing services that are generally performed by automobiles today to some degree. Downtown's a great example. When you watch the various delivery individuals picking up, a lot of that is single vehicle occupants driving all over the city doing deliveries. If we can shift some of that to a battery operated device instead of a gas powered vehicle, that will eventually help with some of our GHG. Is it going to be astronomical? No, but we are creating some of that shift. And if people have that opportunity to maybe have a more sustainable or a more friendly approach to receiving, instead of having the person drive their vehicle to your house for delivery, given that option, I think that sends a strong message. So those are the general things that we're trying to solve by, one, retooling the pilot, but also trying to support our local business community with this service offering that the PDD device manufacturers are planning or wanting to play.
Okay, so when you say local business community, are those the PDD operators or?
We have PDD manufacturers in Mountain.
Okay, so you're not referring to local retail businesses?
There's it's a both and. It's the local businesses that make these devices and operate these devices. It's also providing a value opportunity to Mountain View businesses that can leverage these devices as an extension of their business. So it's a both and.
Okay, and then for the question I had submitted, I mean, I guess it sounds like the goal is to give businesses the option of using these delivery bots. But the theme of the program is not that all the program will benefit local businesses. Or it's. I mean, so, I mean, I didn't understand. So my question was, what support is there showing that PDDs, including ones with a bigger delivery radius that can utilize bike lanes, will in net benefit local restaurants and grocers versus harming them by shifting business to ghost kitchens, grocery delivery warehouse facilities, or large retailers? And then the response was physical retail stores and e-commerce are becoming interdependent for both small and large restaurants and retailers. I didn't understand that response.
So I'm not sure how I can recast it differently. So this is an economic development tool. It may run in some regards, not every single policy is perfectly aligned in achieving goals. This sometimes counteracts with other goals that the city is trying to achieve. Obviously, the city is wanting to be a very bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and we recognize that having devices on sidewalks or in the streets can create some conflict. So trying to find a path forward where we're trying to achieve both of those goals, they don't have to be one or the other, but both. But we are trying to achieve goals on the economic development side, which is to support our business ecosystem here and have it be thriving. Also providing an opportunity for our businesses to grow, get better support. And the reality is the economy is shifting in the way goods are transferred. And collectively, we are contributing to that through our buying behaviors and purchasing behaviors. And this is another opportunity that is available for people to receive their goods. You know, if you gave people the option of purchasing their goods, would you like it delivered by bike? Would you like it delivered by a robot? Would you like to have it be delivered by a car? People, if you gave them that option, they may choose different options. Right now, the option is, I just want it delivered. I don't care how it gets delivered. And right now, that solution is predominantly being done by vehicles, making lots of trips throughout our community. And so can we create a little bit of shift maybe away from single vehicle occupants running through the city to these other devices that are not giving off as much emissions because they're battery operated?
Okay, thank you, thank you. That wasn't really my question. So just one last thing. Are you going to be collecting data on which retailer? Like, was this a Walmart delivery? Was this, like some kind of category of what the bots transferred?
So, as we suggested in the data collection, I will be able to understand that through heat maps. So if they're able to, as a requirement, we're asking that they provide that data. So understanding, one, where are the heat maps? Where are these transactions occurring? And where are the deliveries going? That's where you can also understand patterns. You can also reference incidents, understand impact on if we're measuring times on streets. Those are all things we can overlay and better understand either how this is supporting movement within our city or maybe creating more conflicts. Wow, we notice there's a lot of cross traffic this way. We noticed a 4-minute slowdown on Shoreline Boulevard because we're
Sorry,
all
that
this
wasn't my
traffic.
question. I just wonder if at the end we'll have something that was like dollar amount, 50% of this was Walmart and like 30% of it was Grocery Depot and 1% was Flower Shop. Like, are we gonna have that?
I don't know that we're gonna have specific, once again, we'll try and recast it differently. With the heat map, we will have a general pin of the location.
But a
Presumably
heat
that,
map is like one point in time. How do you know that this, like, you can see lots of activity at this depot and individual addresses, but how can you know how much the bots are delivering for any particular?
I think we'll have to go back and have a conversation
Okay,
internally to
thanks.
figure this out.
Sorry, I had one more
Yes, member.
clarifying question. You mentioned in the presentation that there were 2 companies operating within the city. There was another company, I filed an Ask Mountain View about it. I don't know, y'all can see, but here it is on the Permanente Trail, and I didn't hear this one mentioned. But it was mentioned often on Nextdoor, and I did raise an Ask MV. So that was a third company. I believe that was a grocery delivery robot. It looks, so how did that play into the pilot, in the last pilot?
So they were actually not part of the pilot. They were doing testing around their facility they were unaware that those devices are not allowed on our trails. That Ask MV ticket came in, we reached out to the company and said, if you're going to be testing, test in the parking lot. These are not allowed on the trails. They were not part of the original pilot.
So they never joined, that company never joined the pilot? Okay, thank you.
I have maybe just one now. So my understanding is that for the bots on the sidewalks must be less than 100 pounds. The ones that we're potentially going to allow on the bicycle lanes and the streets can be more than 100 pounds. So assuming those ones would not be able to go on the sidewalk under any circumstances, is that correct? So my question is, what will, when these bots inevitably encounter obstacles in the bicycle lane, they will need to exit the bicycle lane into traffic lane. So you say on the presentation that the traffic lane should be 35 miles per hour or less. Are you going to allow them to exit the bicycle lane when necessary to avoid potentially other delivery trucks? Or will they just simply not be allowed on any street that is more than 35 miles?
Well, so I think that's where the vehicle code would come into play, and they would have to follow the same rules of the road that a cyclist or they would follow.
Anything except the freeway.
So they would, just in theory, there's a delivery truck, they come up on that, they'd have to slow
That
down,
makes perfect sense to me. I'm only asking because there was the 35 mile per hour limit put in the presentation.
I think that the 35 an hour limit was describing the type of street, not the operation of the vehicle.
Yeah, yeah, but if they had to exit if they had to exit the lane and the speed limit was 45 or whatever, then they would briefly be operating in a higher speed. I would hope that they would exit the lane rather than just sticking there, so that's why that's not a question, but yes.
And I would just comment, staff heard the last time at this body and was impressed upon, staff from this committee at the last time was that the speeds of the bot, if they are traveling within the bike lane, should not be in excess of speed of a bike in the bike lane.
Yes.
So that was, made very clear, and that was part of the stipulations we were trying to put in here, which is you don't want the device going faster than an average speed of a bike.
Yes.
So.
Thank you. All right, yes.
So follow up, I guess I saw in the presentation that the 100-pound limit would be removed and there was no specification in that. On the new program slide, it said the old weight limit was 100 pounds, but it didn't specify any new weight limits.
So
The gross weight of less than 100 would
Yeah.
remain. For sidewalks.
So the way to read the chart was basically the current program stays the same. And these are all the augmentations on top of that. So basically what is on the left plus everything gets on the right gets added to it. That makes sense.
Okay, so so all the vehicles would be less than 100 pounds, excluding our.
In the augmentation, sorry, it's not in the presentation, but we do have in the staff memo. Sizes of devices permitted in the bicycle lane may exceed 100 pounds, just due to the size of.
So I guess what was just said is in conflict with the memo. So this is saying the 100 pounds stays, the memo says the 100 pounds is optional.
Apologies, this was a typo on my part, so.
So it is clearly gonna be all vehicles excluding cargo are 100 pounds or less.
It's from the memo. It is the vehicles will operate on sidewalks, must maintain the 100-pound limit, and vehicles that are not going to operate on sidewalks may exceed the 100-pound limit.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That is potentially going to be worked out with transportation and everyone else. Okay. Any further questions? Moving on to public comment, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on item 6.1, personal delivery device highlights program updates?
There's one person on, she's scared, three people online now.
Is there any members of the public in the room wishing to speak? No, then we will take public comment online, and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
I see Bruce England has his hand up.
I'll go ahead then.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. Okay, interesting discussion so far. A couple of comments and et cetera. So a number of you know that during the earlier discussion, the first pilot, when this happened, that a lot of concerns were raised and a lot of questions to make sure that this worked right. There was varying support among BPAC members for it in the first place. And it seemed like the standards that were set through BPAC recommendations and by city council approval were gradually subverted for reasons I've never really fully understood. And it would be good to ensure some of the guidelines you've got in the staff memo and so on look good if they really are enforced with the vendor. So I think that's important. In the memo, it talks about 20 miles per hour on both the shoulder and in the bike lane. Seems to me 20 miles an hour at the shoulder is too high. That's adjacent to pedestrian right away, and it should be lower when you're in the shoulder. The one reason that I like the idea, if it's done right, is equity support. So people who have disabilities, people, seniors and so on, can really depend on these deliveries for essential groceries, medical supplies, medications, and so on like that. So to be able to support those folks, I like the idea, again, if it's done right. However, one thing that's not mentioned here, and I know that John Lang, you know that I brought this up previously at the downtown committee meetings and other places, about bike delivery as an alternative. I think you might get more support from the community if you were to look at that, at least as an alternative, but maybe even as a priority. If somebody wants to look at bike delivery, prioritize that over the robots. So something, I think that's worth exploring. And then lastly, Member Stone brought up the question about 20 miles per hour versus 35. It's a really good question about what happens if these robots have to move into the traffic lane and it's signed for 35 miles per hour, but they're limited to 20. And it's not clear to me what they would do. Would they ramp up to 35 in order to merge into the traffic lane at speed, or how would that be dealt with? So maybe that's a question that can come out during your deliberations. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Do you have any others?
Yes, so April Webster.
Hi, I'm April Webster. I've been a resident of Mountain View for over a decade, and I sit on quite a number of bicycle advocacy organizations. Caltrans District 4 Bicycle Advisory Committee co-chair. I'm on the MTC Active Transportation Working Group as a co-chair as well. I'm on the SVBC Policy Advisory Committee. I'm also a local team lead for Mountain View, one of them. And I'm not speaking on behalf of any of them, but I do see a lot of what's going on in the industry, and I'm quite versed in complete streets and on top of where the industry is going. And I'm not even sure where to start with this. I probably want to say just because we can doesn't mean we should. And to me, this seems like a really bad and a rather dangerous idea. I don't see how it aligns with nor supports the cities, the regions, or even the state's goals for transportation infrastructure that create streets that are safer for people. That seems counter to that. Just for an example, I don't understand how bots would yield in a closed and protected bike lane, or even one that has some openings. Bike lanes are what, maybe 5 feet wide, bikes 2 to 3. I don't know how wide these bots are, but are they going to be able to detect a bike coming along at 15 miles per hour and be able to detect that and move in accurately and in enough time to create a safe situation? Are they going to grow wings and lift up? There seems like this has not been really well thought out, and I don't think we should introduce something into the bike lanes and create more points of conflict and collision. We're trying to go the opposite direction, to be honest. So I agree with Bruce. If we're wanting to enable a more climate-friendly, GHG-friendly way of enabling businesses to do deliveries that don't involve cars, bike delivery is an amazing option. It's one that's been used in New York for God knows how long. And I think that would align much better with the cities and the community's goals. The radius a bicyclist could cover is much wider. I'm sure they could travel at better speeds. They have better maneuverability. There's just so many benefits to a bike delivery than there would be over a robot. And again, I just want to say, just because we do, and I'm in the tech industry, just because we can use technology or AI and we have it available, doesn't mean we should use that hammer for every single problem we face. There are often lo-fi options that make far more sense and provide much greater benefit to the larger community. Thank you.
Okay, next person is Carl Hansen.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, yeah, I'm Carl Hansen. I'm the government relations director for Coco, and we're a sidewalk delivery company that launched in 2020 in Santa Monica and has since expanded out across a number of cities in California and a few out of state now. And we're thrilled to see you exploring the program in Mountain View tonight. The mission of our company is really to get the car out of the equation for local delivery. What we found in dense urban environments where we operate is oftentimes 60% or more of a merchant's delivery volume is within the delivery radius we serve, which is about a 2-mile radius, depending on the merchant and the location. And there's really no reason for those to be in a vehicle. It leads to lots of additional traffic, emissions, and for the merchants, significantly high fees. Particularly for restaurants, the high cost of car-based delivery is incredibly burdensome, and they don't have many better options. Personal delivery devices, sidewalk robots can come in and help them both save money on deliveries when they're operating these tight margin businesses, help reduce emissions, help reduce traffic, and just lead to a better delivery experience for local deliveries. We've done over 100,000 miles of safe deliveries across the markets where we operate. These are some of the busiest pedestrian areas in the country: Hollywood Boulevard, the Santa Monica Promenade, and in each of those locations, like the pilots, our pilots are trained to essentially operate as the most inferior form of pedestrian, in that they yield to all other users of the sidewalk. And they're trained to be particularly mindful of anybody that may look confused around the bod, or if someone is coming to a narrow place in the sidewalk, or there's an A-frame sign, the bod will pull to the side and yield and let people pass, or actually back up if there's not a better option. I think a lot of the concerns that come up about this are totally fair, especially after cities had experiences with the shared scooter programs. But this is really very different, and we're not just saying that. You can see this in Santa Monica and LA. We've served over 50 merchants in Santa Monica, the city of 8 square miles, and it's been widely accepted by the community. About half the states in the country now have approved programs on this, and we hope you'll move forward the staff proposal tonight. So thanks so much.
April, did you want to put your hand back? We can't have two. Thank you, April. We have no more public comment.
Thank you. Then we will close public comment and move on to committee comments. Would any committee members like to provide comments? Member Denman.
Thank you. I'm happy to start. Not saying I won't necessarily think of something as others come up with great comments, but first and foremost, I really appreciate the city of Mountain View partnering with local businesses, both for the smaller retailers that maybe some of the other delivery services are not accessible. Like they can't necessarily have a delivery driver park on Castro Street right now, for example, to pick up something to deliver. So I do really appreciate kind of out of the box thinking, supporting people that are developing new products in Silicon Valley. I think that's interesting. So I appreciate us kind of thinking out of the box. I am very concerned though, and continue to be concerned about our narrow sidewalks, which that's where I had multiple personal interactions, and my partner also had multiple personal interactions separately from me with the prior delivery PDDs on the sidewalk that did not yield to us. One of them barked at my husband. So I appreciate the public comment that they are going to try to be very respectful. But on our narrow sidewalks, yielding is an interesting definition when there's not other curb cuts. Are they going to go into a private driveway in order to get around a pedestrian or a child playing on the sidewalk? A lot of those things, I know we mentioned, I was on VPAC before these came, and we mentioned this, and they were going to be considered, and it's not exactly what happened. And I do appreciate that the limited region for the delivery vehicles also limited the economic feasibility. So I appreciate those things. But that concern remains. The human handler, and in general, all of these items, I'm very happy to hear that I know you all reached out and got those other robots off our trails. So there is some enforcement levers, even for someone who's not actively participating in the program. And I know you did because I stopped seeing them when I was riding my bike there. So that was great. But we have really seen in the past that on BPAC, we agreed with the city, and city council agreed and adopted those prior things that you showed in your presentation about there be a human handler for the first 6 months and there'd be these things. And then none of that happened. And it was changed by, I believe, someone in the city, but not agreed to, never presented to city council that we were going to change the terms of the pilot program. When we asked about it in BPAC, we were just told because COVID, we've changed the rules, but didn't come back to city council to say, hey, we changed the rules. Is that okay? Or even on a consent calendar or anything. So I like a lot of the augmented suggestions. I liked a lot of the original suggestions. I didn't see them enforced. So that's my general concern there. I agree with public comment that we should also consider in London, and I believe also New York City, they have these interesting e-bikes delivery modules that have refrigerated things. And so there's a human operator, but it's an e-bike and it's got a little assistance in there, and they are going around and doing a lot of deliveries in a very tight city like London. And I'm seeing these vehicles traveling in the very busy bike lanes in the city of London as well, quite successfully. You have a lot more, humans have a lot more awareness. And those are assisted by all these, and they've got the route scheduled and all of that. So I think that's really important. I'm concerned about these devices parking in bike lanes. I think that kind of came up with some of the clarifying questions. We have that as an issue right now with delivery vehicles for Amazon in particular. They park in a bike lane, particularly it happens a lot on Evelyn and Middlefield. I hear a lot from, I see or hear a lot from other constituents that come up to me. And if these devices are going to be doing the same thing, it would be interesting. I think if the city may want to consider working with maybe some of the major apartments along, for example, Middlefield and Evelyn Avenue, California Street, to have like a PDD delivery spot. So maybe they're not just stopping, and should be a lot easier to accommodate than finding a place for a big giant van to park. So I think that would be an interesting way of saying, like, here's you all can get here where big van can't, would be awesome. Let's see, I think that is, oh yeah, just general compliance. My concern is general compliance with these rules. I think they're great, but how to check up on them would be, it's going to be a tough problem to solve. And I appreciate you looking into it. That's my comments for now. Thank you.
Okay, so I sent in my comment ahead of time, so hopefully I can stay brief. My main point is that I would like the city to commit to actually asking people who interact with these bots. So we're not talking heat maps. We're not talking waiting for people to submit Ask Mountain Views. We're not talking like some website that people have to go to, but actually proactively asking people, hopefully in collaboration with someone who knows how to do this, like maybe SVBC or maybe there are other organizations, to actually find out what their experience is and whether their enjoyment and intent to use our active transportation facilities is affected by the presence of the bots. I think I made similar comments when this was last presented, and it was like, oh, well, we can't survey. And now again, maybe there's, no intention to survey. And I did some, in public comment, I had this example of what if we had PDDs in airplanes, just because that's a place where similarly you could have a program where you're saying this is very successful because we made this many deliveries to passengers in their seats and there were no major injuries, and therefore this is a good thing. But you failed to ask whether people were actually able to utilize the aisles. Were they able to get to the bathroom when they needed to? Were they able to sit back down? Did they have to wait for these spots? Did their enjoyment of, sitting in coach class decrease further once these PDDs were on the airplane? And I just drew a parallel that given the city's current plan of how it would evaluate the success of this program, it's kind of parallel to the airline saying this is wildly successful, and maybe it would be, but there would be no way to know whether people were less likely to use the aisles. And I think that's important given the city's active transportation plans, which are, let's get more people walking and biking. And I think originally when we were getting the sidewalk bots, I was neutral. I was like, hey, let's see what these are like. Could be cool. And then I actually found that my enjoyment of the narrow sidewalks in Old Mountain View was somewhat decreased by the presence of these bots and by interacting with them. But I don't know if I'm alone because there was never a survey. And so how do we know? Similarly, for the bike lane bots, I think it could actually be better because sidewalks are complicated and they are narrow, and the situations are more ambiguous, and yielding is like, humans, like, we do all sorts of things to not bump into each other on the sidewalk. I think bike lanes could be good because like you have a direction of travel, you kind of know what you're doing. And so and yet I have no confidence that we will discover whether people stop taking certain routes because they have to, they find, oh, I'm always stuck behind one of these, or, so I think that that would be important. And yeah, so my main recommendation is just let's actually figure out how other users are affected beyond whether they're injured. Thanks.
Kuzmo.
Yeah, since we're just going down the line. Yeah, just I think to condense some of what some of my thoughts are, and I think some of what's been expressed. I think the goal in my mind is to make sure we collect enough data that when we get to whenever we're reevaluating this, we can answer the question of, did this program work outstandingly well because it was a perfectly polished, all the companies that did this had perfectly polished products that had one issue every month or something, and they displaced a huge number of car trips, all while not requiring a human to be going around delivering stuff for other people, and had no safety incidents while removing cars from the road, so hopefully making other things safer, and it's all lovely? Or is it the other extreme of it's affecting 1% or less of deliveries, and they're constantly getting stuck in the bike lanes and causing safety issues and getting stuck in curb cuts and making everyone miserable? I'm going to guess it's neither of those complete extremes. I at least hope it's not the bad extreme. But to my mind, a lot of what when I'm looking at this, I'm just asking, how can we make sure that we get the data we need to answer that question? I mean, I think the data listed here is generally the high level data that it makes sense in terms of what we would want to capture. There's a part of me that wants to try to get even more granular location data and such, but that runs into privacy issues. I think the specific thing that I would call out for data collection that I'm not sure the right way to characterize would be basically how much time do they spend stopped to where? Like how much of the time do vehicles spend stopped on roads without bike lanes, on inside of bike lanes, on curb cuts, on sidewalks of what width? That sort of thing. So we can get an idea of how frequently are these sorts of issues occurring. We'll presumably have some feel of it from complaints from people. But I think that would be one of the core things, as would just overall delivery volumes, basically, which I think is essentially what's captured. Yeah, number of deliveries is already captured. So that's where I'm coming from in most of this. In regards to some of the specific policies, I think the thing that makes me most nervous, just looking at where I'll also say, sorry, complete divergence. I did speak independently on a Zoom remote call with Value Robotics, which is not the people that called in, but I talked to them briefly in case anyone is wondering. And they are one of the companies that was talking about it like bike lane, like robot. Sorry, back to what I was saying. The thing I'm most concerned about is basically the roads where there are bike lanes. Yeah, basically the roads where there are bike lanes. Like I'm thinking something like you have the 35-mile-an-hour street and you have a bike lane, something happens that maybe there's a car that's parked in a weird way that causes the PDD to stop in the bike lane and say, okay, this is a weird situation, I have to stop here. And that more completely blocks the bike lane. Maybe the car is partially blocking it. I don't know. And that creates a safety issue. And that probably outweighs the car trip that was displaced by the PDD, making the delivery in the first place. And so I am really, those are the sorts of situations that make me really nervous. The sort of second tier is like walking curb cuts, ending up in sort of protected bike lanes where they're too narrow for someone to pass if it does get stopped. And maybe at least that's a situation where if you're on a bike, you are almost forced to do something safer than verging out into 35-mile-an-hour traffic. Like as one of the public commenters was saying, how do these vehicles accelerate to 35 miles an hour, be safe in 35-mile-an-hour traffic? Well, most bicyclists cannot accelerate to 35 miles an hour to get around a delivery vehicle or the such. So that's where my concerns are. So I'd be especially interested in like when we look at what like geofencing would look like for some of these companies, what routes would they actually need to use where there would be these safety issues? Like if I were to look at just the downtown area, and I know there's interest in being able to do more than the downtown area. If I were to just look at just the downtown area, the only road that I can think of where I'd be overly concerned about that specific issue would be California Street, because that has unprotected bike lanes currently. And I believe 35-mile-an-hour traffic, at least on parts, but if it isn't allowed 35 mile an hour, it's close to it. But there's a grid. There's parallel streets on almost all of that where if a PDD gets stuck on a narrow street, there's plenty of space. Cars aren't moving fast. There's plenty of space for a cyclist to go around. I'm not as worried. So I'd be curious which routes are actually like top of mind for companies to be able to use. But we may not, I doubt we would know that yet. That where these sorts of safety issues might arise. In terms of other specific things, I think I'll be interested to hear what the results of talking about like specific the weird edge cases of Paseos and whatnot are. I don't know the right answer of all of those. There's things that when I was just thinking about that, I was like, oh, do we even want to allow these to cross train tracks? Like that, if something is stuck on the train tracks, that creates all sorts of issues. Let's see. I don't know. I share some concern about how the program will evolve. I saw almost as a like, I want to see this program succeed as best as it can, which probably means some rules will have to evolve over time. But I also want to make sure those rules are evolving in ways that are transparent. So I don't know what that means in terms of most effective things, but yeah. Yeah, I think that's basically my comments. Yeah. Oh, weight limits. I assume most actual companies are looking at this would have reasonable sized vehicles that would go in the bike lane, but I'd rather not see like just cars going into the bike lane. So a greater than 100-pound weight limit sounds reasonable, but perhaps not. I don't want a 2,000-pound vehicle in the bike lane. I think that, yeah.
You, yeah, let's put it on the line. So I will go next. There's a lot of different angles to think about this. I share concerns about enforcement and safety issues. But I also recognize that a 100-pound robot on a sidewalk is a lot safer than a dude in an SUV with a hamburger. So shifting away from, vehicle deliveries is a worthy goal. As far as I know, there's nothing preventing someone doing a cargo bike delivery program in the city of Mountain View, but nobody's asking. So we have, this is what's before us. And if it shifts some deliveries, then that's good. But if it forces people off into traffic in dangerous ways, or if your bicycle lane vehicle falls over or runs into somebody or something else, we really need to be on top of it because it's a pilot program. And I'm really hoping that the city will work very closely and jump on all the issues as they arrive. And also, as Member Adamic said, there should be a way, and Member Kuzmo, to evaluate. Like, let's get some objective metrics, ideally before the program starts. Let's decide what success is, decide when we're going to decide what success is, and so it doesn't shift, as we go along. I would really like to see something like that in place. What I'm most excited about is the data. I think some origin destination data can also help us make decisions about where to focus our active transportation and other transportation infrastructure. I would be really interested to see metrics on when and why a bicycle robot has to exit the bicycle lane. And maybe if it's exiting because of the obstruction, that can be reported to the city right away. Because I know often I'll be riding my bike and I see an obstruction and I think, oh, I need to report that. But by the time I get to the destination, it slipped my mind. So it doesn't get reported. So automatic reporting would be really cool. Yeah, I think that's my main additional comments. Yeah, just general lane condition statistics. How it would be cool to have that data. Understand where the problems are. That would help all bicycle lane users.
Okay, so I'll go through my comments. So I would actually like to see a pilot in terms of something that's measurable. And to echo Member Adamic, it really, you have to measure not just one metric, but all the metrics, all the benefits, all the costs, not just greenhouse gas reduction, for instance, greenhouse gas reduction versus internal combustion engine, and what greenhouse gas reduction versus electric cars. So if Waymo offered all electric cars, would that be better than the PDDs? I don't know, but the pilot should tell us what the difference is. If it's a 1,999 pound PDD, which would be okay with Member Stone, the reduction may not be as much as if it's a 100-pound one. So I think the key thing is measuring the impacts, and as Member Dominic said, measuring the cost. What is the congestion added to sidewalks? What is the impact of delays in the bicycle lanes? What other costs maybe that aren't anticipated? Because you do a pilot because you can't anticipate everything. I think many of us are concerned that we're an advisory board. We have no legislative ability to change the requirements. We have no enforcement ability. Yet we are probably the ones that have the most experience using the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, or at least represent the range of people in Mountain View to do that. Single purpose internal combustion vehicle trips are wasteless, whether they're the 50 door dashes a night going through Tommy Ties or Zareen's, or whether it's a bunch of deliveries coming from Costco or someone operating a flower shop off their kitchen table. Those are costly, and eliminating the environmental cost, eliminating the labor cost, eliminating the infrastructure cost to support the wider travel vehicles and their parking are all good, but we have to be able to measure that. So I think my main concern in the clarifying questions was, can we tighten up all those areas? The definitions of reasonable. Member Stone said a reasonable vehicle size. I think reasonable ought to be specified in height, weight, and width or whatever, and specified in speed capabilities. I have no trouble with a vehicle going 35 miles an hour and an autonomous vehicle in a 35 mile an hour regular travel. I probably do of 1,000-pound PDD and going 20 miles an hour in a bike lane, just given the stopping distance. So I'm just concerned about the metrics and what we're trying to do with the pilot. The companies, as we heard, would like to understand market fit. Where does this fit? Is it more Costco deliveries? Is it more the one-person flower shop? Is it trips at 5 o'clock that are getting displaced, or sidewalk trips at noon? We don't know yet. And so even little things like the heat map, having it time sliced. So is it the trips, what time of day, and if they're all at 5 a.m. in the morning, maybe that's an easy thing, but we don't know when or how they'll be until it really starts happening. But having the ability to see that data, whether it's where they're stopping, where they're pickups that may be interrupting traffic flows. So I think we just need to be really clear about what we're trying to measure, both in cost and benefits, how we will have access to that data, and how we would look at it, and anything we can do to be clear. I'd like to be more transparent. I don't think we should mention vehicle codes. They're basically non-existent on PDD, and referencing them, people might think, oh, there's a whole lot of set of vehicle codes that apply. It must be safe, must be reasonable. That's not the case. If we're going to reference bicycle vehicle codes, let's reference them. If we're going to reference automobile vehicle codes, let's reference them. And otherwise, we should be real clear that it's the wild west as far as PDD goes in the California vehicles. I don't think that's just a transparent way to present it. So that summarizes, I think, most of my comments. That is, I'm skeptical, as anyone should be, on a pilot, but I think with proper specification and a good collection of data, we can really evaluate whether a pilot is reasonable. We don't want to have a pilot be an endorsement. We want a pilot be a study to provide an assessment.
Any other comments, Member Guzman?
Yeah, I just remembered one thing I was thinking too. I don't know, I saw a 10-mile-an-hour limit for sidewalks. I don't know if that was in the original program. There are sidewalks where if there were no one around for 100 feet, would be comfortable having PDDs moving at 10 miles an hour. In sidewalks where there are pedestrians particularly nearby, I would find that uncomfortable. That may be something that regulates itself pretty reasonably with how the companies design their vehicles. So I don't know that requires extra specification in our pilot program, but it's something I'd be leery about. Just 10 miles an hour is a fast runner. So.
Yeah, it's something Member Stone said about, by the time you get off your bike, you forget to record or report what you encountered. So I think it's possible that when the pilot expands to bots in bike lanes, that we will have even fewer reports relative to incidents. Like I find this very frequently, right? I've just navigated the situation on my bike. Thank goodness that's behind me. I'm going to bike on. Probably the reason why I'm on my bike is because I need to get somewhere by some time. So it's not, with walking downtown, oftentimes I had more leisure to, report, but I think we should not count on getting user reports as frequently with bikes. And then, okay, I don't know about the utility of this comment, but just the timing of this is that, like, finally, we're gonna get some protected bike lanes on California and El Camino. Like, after all these years, maybe we'll get them. And then maybe even before we get to try them out, like the bots are gonna be there and they're gonna be trying them out. It's like, okay, back to the airline thing analogy, like imagine that the airline is like, we've made new airplanes and now there's gonna be an extra 3 inches in the aisle. And you're like, great, now when I pass another passenger, I'm not gonna have to stick my butt in someone's face or whatever. But then you realize that actually this new space that you think you got, it's gonna be used by the bots. So, and very likely people won't feel like this, but I'm just sharing my maybe illogical feelings about immediately having to share the new infrastructure. Thanks.
Staff appreciates comments and feedback.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, we will move on to item 6.2, which is the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Agency feedback update from member Adamic.
Yes, so briefly, Stacy Banerjee from Los Altos and Betsy Megas from Santa Clara were reelected as chair and vice chair. They do a really nice job. One thing, especially since we have like now a new chair and vice chair here, I can say that what they've done in the past and will do again is they actually draft a statement that they share with the VTA board about what they would like the BPAC to do and what they think the board should do with respect to bike ped issues. And then they present it to the committee and so on. So it's like, it's a little bit more proactive in terms of, but just something to consider. It's something that they do and it's kind of a nice, I don't know. It's like, hey, we're BPAC and this is what we think. Okay, the VTA will apply for a grant to understand across barrier connections, specifically across freeways and especially from in historically disadvantaged communities where school catchment areas may have been bisected. So they didn't get the grant yet, but they've done a lot of prep. So hopefully that will come through. And then there was the climate action and adaptation plan that was presented again now in near final form. And this is everything from VTA operations, like their buses and light rail and so on, and staff, like what are the greenhouse gas emissions relating to that, how it can be minimized, but also how to adapt to impacts such as flooding or wildfires, which may affect some of the routes. And then of greatest relevance to bike ped is there was a request at a prior BPAC presentation to add a notification system for when bike trails are flooded. And this was now included in the plan. And there was then further comment to also provide detour info when trails are flooded. And then I just included a comment from Betsy Megas that included some projects further south in the county that that are planned and that have meetings associated if any of you are interested. And that's it.
Thank you. Yes, do you have a
Clarifying question. So you mentioned that the chair and vice chair of the BPAC provide a memo or a statement.
Yeah.
Is that linked in any of your report, or is that something you could find and point us to?
I could, yes, I could find a past one and pass it along. Yeah.
That'd be great, thank you.
They do it once a year.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
How are, I noticed this is in a Google document. How are we archiving these reports per month for public records? I'm not sure, you may not be able to answer that. That may be a question for city.
I was thinking the same thing. We can discuss it later.
Okay.
I have not deleted. I just add.
Thank you for that clarification, Deborah Domick.
Are there any other clarifying questions? Any public comment on the VTA EPAC report? Member comments?
I'll add well, just since trail planning status was mentioned, there's a unofficial.
Hold on, we have a late hand.
Oh, April Webster.
Sure, I can just add, oh, can you hear me? I was just gonna add something to the VTA report, because Lauren was at and I think this is important and relates back to DIB 94. But Lauren was at the SVBC PAC and presented on her application for the study on interchanges. And I think it's very timely and important because interchanges were left out of DIB 94. And this is, there is a lot of disappointment and pushback on this, because interchanges are kind of like the intersections of highways, and it is the most contentious, dangerous part of Caltrans right-of-ways. So I didn't get a chance to bring it up in the presentation because it was just really short on time, but where that stands right now is the number of advocacy organizations across the state pushed back on this, wanted to know why. We had a meeting with Caltrans headquarters in mid-December, and they formed a subcommittee there's an issue with the width of vehicles and whether those are supported on interchanges and coming off highways. And the Complete Streets team has formed a subcommittee to evaluate 16 different types of interchanges and come up with more specific designs for each of those types of interchanges. They're expecting to come to make those results and designs available in the next year or so. And then there's a hope, or the goal is to, by the time they can propose an amendment or a new DIB, which I think isn't 2 years after this one, they can amend it to include direction for interchanges. And then also for Caltrans, in our district, the bike plan is being revised right now. And they're doing a lot of work. Jasmine Stitt, who's running it, is looking at best practices for interchanges. So this is, it's recognized as a serious problem. And so it's great. I was thrilled to hear that Lauren had applied for one of the sustainable transportation grants, and hopefully we'll get it, because a lot more work needs to be done on this. It's been a problem throughout the state. So anyhow, just wanted to add a bit more detail on that context. Thanks.
I was going to have a brief comment, just since trail fighting status was mentioned, and since I was reminded about this by having to bike through about 8 inches of water on the San Tomas Trail a few weeks ago to cross 101. There is a entirely unofficial website maintained by a member of the public. If you search Santa Clara County trail flooding status, uses the valley water stream gauges to guess which underpasses are flooded on all the various trails, which is just based on like crowdsourced data. But if anyone's ever curious. Second.
Thank you. Any other member comments? And we will move on to item 6.3, VPAC fiscal year 2023 to 24 work plan. We have something to look at.
I will be presenting, Chair. And here are, per our normal process, we'll review the work plan. Anything in yellow has changed since the last time you've seen it, and we'll also do the same thing for the tentative agenda list or the TAL. What has changed since the last you've seen it is that 2 bike rides occurred that we will give you more details about in the staff update, December 2nd and 16th. Those are the only changes to the work plan. For the tentative agenda list, you see the changes that occurred here at this meeting. The local road safety plan was in this meeting and has been moved to February. The active transportation improvement funding was in the February meeting and has been moved to March. And then the MTC, which is the MPO for the Bay Area, Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Bay Area, transportation oriented community policy analysis has been postponed until further notice. That is all I have for my presentation.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions? Any public comments? No. Any member comments?
So I guess I have a question or a comment. So the next time we see the active transportation plan is in June? Or any discussion of it?
That is what's currently on the tell.
Okay, this is just a comment, but I've just been noticing there are things going on like the Astro undercrossing, which seem, I mean, that one is just bike ped. And we never saw it here, and there are major things happening with that. So I just wanted to point that out. And then also the Moffett precise plan is, you know, it's going to be something that the council is going to look at some point as well. And then for Earth Day, okay, this is like not, I might try and organize like a bike to Mountain View High on Stevens Creek Trail. So if anyone's interested, I think it's like a Monday, April 20-something. If anyone's interested in joining me.
That might be best for the committee comments.
Oh, in item 7.2. We're in comments on the work plan.
Wasn't there a thing about Earth Day and
Part of our work
committee
plan is
activities?
doing
That's true.
community bike rides. I don't know. But
Okay. I thought it might be relevant.
Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on to the foreshadowed staff announcements. Item 7.1, staff comments.
That's gone. Can't see my mouse. See my mouse? Okay, let's try the keyboard.
Board navigation.
Okay, I think it's F2 this big. Anybody remembers? Okay, we're just gonna work from a small.
F8.
F8.
yeah, F8 or F9 probably.
F8. Oh, F9. Oh, okay, we're just gonna work from a small. Sorry about that. I don't really have any idea what's going on. Recent developments. So we had on December 2nd, our day worker ride, where we had many people, a decent turnout, but even more people donated online who weren't able to make it to that actually rainy bike ride. So there's a picture there. You can see member Adamic there was able to attend, and we appreciate your attendance. The December 16th Mountain View Transit Center holiday ride with Palo Alto. That is the picture there below. It's kind of hard to get a not blurry picture in the dark, but we had 55 people ride with us from Mountain View Transit Center to Christmas Tree Lane in Palo Alto, which makes it our second most attended ride and our very first night ride, which is just a great number for cold weather and in the dark. On December 22nd, the Miramonte Bike-Wide Preliminary Design Study RFP went out on the 21st, and we have 3 proposals that have come in. So we're in the very beginning stages of starting work on that project. Also more recent developments, capital projects team formed a pavement inspection for trails. That's PCI, pavement condition index, occurred on your trails at the end of last year. So we appreciate the capital projects team for that. Castro interim pedestrian mall, decorative treatments, the ribbons, looks like I misspelled ribbons, that's nice. For the central walkway were recommended by the Visual Arts Committee and by the Council Transportation Committee. And there is a picture there of the treatment that was recommended. And on the right, there is a picture of all the places the trail inspection team went to inspect trail. Upcoming events. On February 4th, we have, there's a presentation on the history of El Camino by the Mountain View Historical Organization. So if you would like more details on that, head over to their website and go to the events section. On February 13th, I will be presenting on the ATP Downtown Input Session for the Downtown Business Association so that they can have input on the ATP and how it relates to the downtown area. On February 24th, that's our next bike ride. And this bike ride is to Palo Alto to visit the donkeys. That's Bull Park. So there's a picture there of the donkey that was modeled into Shrek's donkey. Major motion picture. And then finally, Vision Zero Marketing Outreach Campaign. The kickoff meeting is in February. Consultant has been selected. That is MIG, who also did the Slow Down campaign, Vision Zero campaign for the city of San Jose. And then finally, we have Ask MV reports. So these are the last, these are the 4 months that I was able to process here since our last meeting. So you can see we have a lot of similar patterns here. See anything that stands out in particular. We had more near misses reported in July than normal, but there's no real pattern to those. It's not a consistent area, so just probably a blip in the data there. Lastly, we have no comments on Castro during that time. And I will be making an effort, as you saw, we did 4 months here, get us caught up. Hopefully, if going at 4 months for every one of these months, then we'll be caught up relatively soon. But happy to answer any questions. That is all I have.
I have one more thing that I realized. We also submitted an application for a planning grant, Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant for Rengstorff Avenue. So complete streets feasibility study.
And
Fingers crossed.
that's just money because Caltrans has no jurisdiction on Rengstorff, right?
Yeah.
Any other member clarifying questions? Adamic.
Oh, I was wondering, since Miramonte seems to have multiple segments, which segment was this?
So there's 2 projects. Phase 1 is one that is with the Capital Projects Group right now. They'll be repaving the area from Castro through Cuesta, and this one has come to you before. It has some augmentations, in particular close to Graham Middle School. So we applied for Measure B grant funding and were selected for that. And we're using that for phase 2, what we're calling phase 2. So that's the other 2 segments to understand how we can tie into what's planned for that middle segment and, you know, what are the options, what's feasible for that area. So that's from El Camino to Castro and then from Cuesta all the way to the city limits.
And the RFP there was referring to the one that's with the capital.
No, the RFP is for the planning.
Planning. Okay.
I have a question. There was a note about a trail inspection team. Will we get to see the results of that inspection at a future BPAC meeting, perhaps?
I think that can be arranged, yes.
Yes.
public
Is
comment.
there any public comment on the committee, staff
Nothing on mine.
work?
No.
Member comments. I had a small comment, I guess if you look at the Ask MV reports, it does seem like, headway getting blocked gets reported a lot more than bikeway getting blocked, as we were discussing in the earlier item. That is my observation. There are no other committee comments. Then we can move on to item. Well. Our staff comments. So item 7.2 is committee comments. Does any member of the committee have any announcements, updates, requests, or reports? Please. Yes, Member Fenwick.
I just wanted to say that, thanks for the city, the issue I'd raised in November regarding unsafe sidewalk condition was resolved a couple of weeks ago. I raised it, this BPAC I raised with the city in October, that there is now a construction fence against the sidewalk, so now you can't just fall into a big ditch. So that's really nice. I'm really excited about that. I also just wanted to say, I don't really know what to say, but just as a general comment, the public comments this at the top of the meeting were reprehensible, and I am just a little saddened that such thing has come to BPAC. Yeah, I just, it kind of threw me out of all my things I was thinking about talking about today. So thank you. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was also a bit rattled. Yeah. Thank you to former Chair Kuzma for your handling of the situation. Okay, moving on. Item 8, date and time for next meeting. The next meeting will be Wednesday, February 28th at 6:30 p.m. And then item 9 is calendar. Do I read these out? I don't know.
I
think
generally
they're
only read the item
quickly
8.
done.
You can just point to
You
the
can if you want.
agenda.
I will skip it. Then we'll move on to item number 10, which is adjournment, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:30.
Thank you.